It's 7 o'clock, so I'm going to start recording, and I see in the upper corner that it is recording. First of all, let's start with your questions. Do you have any questions that you need for us to answer tonight? Okay. I just want to go over a few reminders. I want you to keep working on your AAPTEL until it is finished, if you are not finished with it. Some of you are finished and the scores have come back and they're very good. I would like for you to stay up to date with the AAPTEL, because some things that are happening are causing the ones of you who have done your work and it's complete to have to keep going back and double checking, because in the group, some people may be so far behind that they're having to check throughout the whole time to get their second peer review completed. I'm going to give you something that's really not in the best interest of all of you, but it's an option so you can get your total points. For those of you, I'd say by the end of week 13, if the people that you're supposed to do peer reviews on have not posted the tasks that you need to review for your second review, go ahead and review someone else's. It doesn't matter to me because it's all on discussion board. And while it won't be helpful to the people who've already done it, hopefully, it will help you get more and more comfortable with doing the peer reviews. It will also give you an opportunity to actually get your full amount of points. And that's something I want to make sure that you have the opportunity to do. It would be nice if they would get them posted so you could actually do the ones that you need to do. But some of them may be winding up wanting an incomplete and finishing up between the fall semester and the spring semester. I'm hoping that most of them get it finished by the time I have to turn in grades, but we'll wait and see.
Dr. Todd?
Yes.
This is just a question that my group and I were talking about this week. Will you and Dr. Tillman be our professors for the entire thing?
No, we won't. What they usually do is I may get you when you do the fifth semester or the third semester. What they usually do is they have a certain group of us that does 601, another group does 603, and another group does 605.
Okay.
I've actually taught 601, 602, and 605. And, so it just depends, but most likely I will not have you second semester.
So you two don't follow us all the way through?
Now, Dr. Tillman's supposed to follow you all the way through.
Oh, okay.
She's supposed to stay with you unless they change things or her load gets to be too heavy.
Okay.
But she's supposed to stay with you all through it. But the one that's the teacher of the course usually changes. And like I said, I may get you again in the third semester because last summer I taught 605.
Okay.
But normally it changes around.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? All right. I want you to look at the second bullet. This is really an important piece. And because I wanted to make sure that I got it right, I did send Dr. Lamb an email and ask him what he was expecting when it calls for a bibliography. It does not say annotated bibliography. It just says a bibliography for task 1 of the AAPTEL. Well, what his response is an annotated bibliography is optional. So you have to do the information that's being required, which is the lit review, but you don't have to do an annotated bibliography. You just have to do a bibliography. And so my way of looking at it, and I don't know whether Dr. Tillman is looking at it the same way, but since the focus became, if it's mentioned in the rubric, it needs to be in the document rather than as an appendix. My suggestion would be, if you choose not to do it as an annotated bibliography, you would include your bibliography of just the ones that you included in your lit review. And then you might have other references that you'd put in other places, but I would put a subheading, bibliography, to make it match what is in the actual proficient column of the rubric. Dr. Tillman, is that sort of what you're thinking too?
Well, that's never what I've expected. I've expected it to be on the reference page and to look like APA requires. But if we've got some evaluators that are saying it needs to look and sound exactly like it says, bibliography is different from reference. So I guess that's what we'll get.
And, you know, I think this is something that hopefully they'll clarify for us when they have our meeting. They're going to have a meeting of the faculty on January the 5th, maybe, I think. So hopefully that's something that they will clarify for us, and but, you know, so far, we only had that one thing that's been brought back to us, but when I saw what was being sent back, and the comment from Dr. Lamb was, it's the way the rubric reads, it should match the rubric, then that's when I felt like we needed to make sure we put the action plan in there. And this rubric does say you develop a lit review with a bibliography. So that pretty much tells me it better be there, or you might get it sent back. Now, when it's sent back, you can always fix it, but you don't want to do that because we're getting to the end of the semester and you want to be finished. So that is something to keep in mind. You do not have to do an annotated bibliography. You can if you choose.
So
It might actually look better in the paper if it was an annotated bibliography. But I wanted to make sure you knew that you had that option.
Dr. Todd, does that mean that we don't, like in my paper, I put it as an attachment? Should it be embedded within the paper? Because I mean, it's multiple pages.
Well, that's, you did the annotated bibliography, right?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Based on what he said with the one that he returned, that he wanted it in the paper, that's when we started, and he wanted it to match the rubric. That's when we started asking you to put it in your paper.
So we would like start off with the annotated bibliography and then do the lit review, or vice versa?
I would do it vice versa. I would do the lit review, and then I would do the annotated bibliography if you choose to do that. Or I would just put the subheading bibliography for the literature review, and then I would just list that, you know, and you can do it annotated bibliography for lit review, and just go through it and make sure that we get all the pieces in there. That way I don't see, I mean, the next thing will happen is they'll send them back because they want them in the end. But, you know, we're trying to do what we think they're wanting. And so whenever I see that change and that became the focus, that's when I started to say, okay, let's make sure we put the action plan in there. Let's make sure we do this. If it's in that column, then that's what I've been recommending.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, any other questions while we're there?
I do.
Yes, Kelly.
So one of the subheadings was background information about school and community. How do you want that to be different from or what was in task 1 of the AAPTEL?
Doesn't have to be different.
It's the same thing.
It can be the exact same thing. You just put it at the front before you get into the tasks.
Cut and paste.
Copy and paste.
Now, will it show plagiarized and turn it in?
It's possible, yes, and not plagiarized, but it's possible that it will show that it's been seen before.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll change a few words.
Okay.
On mine, I did do mine a little bit different just because it said like in the community. So
Yeah.
that's okay too, right? Like, I mean, I have some of this same information, but I went more in depth about like our SIT team and like how many times we have staff meetings and things like that.
Well, and another thing, if you need to tell about the community and if you want to change it a little bit and make sure you have enough information about your community, you can get some census information that tells about your community, and that will make this one a little bit different. But you also are going to need the community information probably in, is it task 3? I mean, it's the one on the community. I don't remember the name of it, but it's not in this semester. I think it's in next semester.
Okay.
So, you know, you may not want to put a whole lot about the community because that will be coming up, but it's good to include some, and that would make it different so it wouldn't show up. Now, the good part is for the AAPTEL, the Turn-It-In score has to be 40 or below. For the AAPTEL, the Turn-It-In score has to be 50 or below. So that may be allowing some of the pieces that you've already used and you're showing again and again. I don't know that it's necessary for you to leave in the descriptions and the prompts and all that. I don't know whether it's going to count or not. It may or may not, just depending on how that it, and I don't remember as I've looked at them, it doesn't pick those up as the same, but it does pick up when you're talking about your school. It picks up information that you may have pulled from a report card, like the North Carolina report card or the South Carolina, whatever theirs is called. So it does pick up some of those things, and it highlights that that's what it's counting.
Okay.
That's a good question. One other reminder is keep working on your competency folio. We are in week 12.
Amen.
We are in week 12. Remember, you really have just 3 weeks left.
And I need to grade them.
Yeah. And even though it says that there are 16 weeks, that last week is very short, and we have to have grades in like real soon in that last week. So that's why I said count it as 3 weeks that you've got after this week. So keep that in mind and make sure you get those evidences. You need at least one evidence for every one of the competencies in your competency folio. And remember, we've talked about how task 5 and task 4 are different from the competency folio. Just make sure you keep that in mind. Kelly.
So when we are working our competency folio, I know we attach like our evidences, but then we just write just a short, brief paragraph about what it is.
I don't even know that Dr. Lamb cares whether you have that. He's looking for evidences in that. I think it makes more sense if you write a brief paragraph as to why you included that and what it shows. But it doesn't.
Dr. Todd,
yes.
I gave the students on the form that I gave them, it's called competency record. On the bottom of that, on page 2 of that form, there is a format for them to use.
Okay.
It tells them exactly what that should look like. And if they'll make it look like that, it'll fly through with colors.
Okay.
Thank you.
Use the format. Okay. Because in the format, it tells them, it reminds them about the digital competency, because what happens, they get to the end and they haven't marked the digital competencies. If they follow that format that I gave them, they won't end up in that pickle. So
that sounds good. So go back and find that reference and use that.
Yes.
All right.
Well, I've been looking at this checklist, but I have to admit I didn't realize that there was an example at the bottom. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Okay.
Because I see that on the second page now.
All right. All right. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to talk briefly about the task 4 of the AAPTEL. And what it says is pretty much you're to reflect on the AAPTEL by analyzing your development as a leader using course content, your internship, and your development of the AAPTEL. So you're focusing on the AAPTEL, what all you've done since you started the AAPTEL for this. And this is where you're going to tie together, just like we did in task 5 of the AAPTEL, all of your experiences and tell how those experiences have helped you develop competence in the areas for this part of the semester. You are to comment on 13, and that's what the rubric says, 13. Those are the ones you didn't include for the AAPTEL, and then others of your choice. So since there's 21 and you had 12 one semester and 13 this semester, you're going to have some that are going to overlap. But make sure that you include the ones you didn't focus on in the first semester, and then some others that you've done a lot of work with till where you come up with 13. And I just reminded you at the end of this semester, you will have reflected on all 21 competencies in either task 5 of the AAPTEL or task 4 of the AAPTEL. And some of the competencies you will reflect on in both of the documents. And then I reminded you have to have 21 competencies, evidences for the 21 competencies before, so you can turn your competency folio in. And a reminder, Dr. Tillman, they do not turn this in for grading. They just turn it in for you to review, correct?
That is correct, but it is part of my pass-fail. I have to have those 21 competencies. That's part of the grade on the portfolio. And so that's really a big sticky piece. I spend a lot of time working with the individual tasks, but that folio is really my bailiwick. That's where I'm supposed to be making sure that it happens. So, you know, make sure that you do the 21 competencies and that you do the other 2 pieces, the competency analysis and the dispositions. Those 2 things don't take much time, but you want to make sure you get them done. And don't forget your log is at the bottom of the competency folio. And you don't submit that to TaskStream. You just leave it sitting there in web pages and folios.
Yeah. And I need to clarify, the competency folio is already in TaskStream. And you do not submit it for evaluation in TaskStream until you finish the 3rd round, the 3rd semester.
Yeah.
But you do have to submit it for review or whatever the term is so Dr. Tillman can see it and make sure that it is all done.
Yeah, it's in the web pages and folio section. You just click on the one that you created and you're keeping all your stuff on that web page until the very end of the course. And then we'll give you a video on how to transfer that sucker over and put it in your portfolio. It's not in your portfolio until you finish it and you're told to transfer it over.
So that's a real important piece, and considering how much confusion there's been over the tasks and the competency folio, we really need to make sure that you understand that. And that's the reason I'm going over this and having Dr. Tillman talk about it, because it is really important that you not submit it for the folio to be evaluated until your 3rd semester, your final semester, after you have all of your 21 competencies with evidences 3 times. So once each semester. All right, any questions about anything related to the AAPTEL at this point? I hear somebody, but I don't see, I don't, not well enough to know what you were asking. Okay. All right. There is, you know that you're to work on your case study 2. And the one thing that I'm going to stop right now and see if I can share with you a screen, because I want to remind you of where some of the information is that you need. So
Dr. Todd,
yes.
I'm sorry, I did just think of a question. I knew I had one and I couldn't remember what it was, and now I just remembered.
Welcome to our club.
That's right. Welcome to our life.
I know that in task 2 we're supposed to do 5 consecutive days, but is there a certain number of walkthroughs that we need to have done and have statistics on, Or is it just as many as we can get done in those 5 days? And are we supposed to visit the same people more than once, or are we trying to get around to as many people as we possibly can?
I think you're just trying to get around to see as many things as you can see in a period of those 5 days.
Okay.
Knowing that you also have other responsibilities and other duties. So, you know, it's what's reasonably possible. What you're trying to do is get a look at how many teachers are using these things that have been proven to be really good ways of helping children learn. If you're using Marzano's, you know, how many
in my comments. So I have one, you know, it has observed, not observed, and comments. So if it says not observed, sometimes it's just because
it's the day
it wasn't that part of the lesson, and so I can't say for certain whether or not it was. So I make a note about that. But if there was the opportunity to use it and it wasn't used, then I'm making a note about that. Is that kind of what we need to be doing?
Yes, that's exactly what you need to be doing.
Okay.
And it might be that after you've done this and you didn't see those things, that you talk with the teachers as you're just casually going by and say, do you ever use these strategies? Has anybody ever shown you these strategies? They're supposed to be something that research says has helped, you know, and that kind of thing, and make it very casual so they don't feel like you're fussing at them, because they don't need that. You know? They're usually so tired anyway. They certainly don't need anybody fussing at them. All right,
okay, thank you. I'm sorry I interrupted. It just I could not remember what my question was.
That is perfectly okay, and I want you to.
I have one more question too.
Yes, ma'am.
Do we need to wait for you to grade our checklist and AAPTEL to start the observations?
Okay, I think I have looked at all of the AAPTEL 1 except for 2 that were put up either yesterday or today.
I put mine up yesterday.
Okay, I have not gotten that, but I got most of them cleared out yesterday. So wait until Dr. Tillman and I have looked at them, because I plan on looking at it either tonight or tomorrow sometime. So it shouldn't make you but about a day late.
Okay.
Okay. Anybody else? All right, I want to share a couple of things with you, and hopefully this is going to work. Okay, where is it? That's not what I want to see. Okay. They've updated, and I can't find any of the things I'm looking for. Hold on just a minute. I'm going to back out of that because it's not where I wanted it to be. I had, and I'm not going to leave you right now, but what it is, what I want you to do is when you go to the class web or class Blackboard shell, open it up to week 12, and then on the side you have the different tabs, and there's one that says case study, and there's the first one is directions once you hit case study, and then it has information about case study 1, case study 2. Well, the main thing is you need to look at your directions for how to deal with the case study. I went over it in the video that I did on Sunday to tell you and remind you what those were, but you can look at it for yourself. This time, the case study has 3 questions, and you are to answer those 3 questions prior to having your group meet and talk about it. And those 3 questions, your task is a community of teachers, and those 3 questions are: what guidelines could Donna have provided for the teachers prior to the grade level meetings, and how could the teachers' final plans be effective for the instructional process, and how would the principal be able to evaluate whether the new observation format was working successfully for the students. So once you read the case study, you answer those, and then when you get together in your group, you talk about the whole task, and you are to then at the end reflect, and the case study gives you the exact things you're supposed to be talking about. And in your Zoom group, you're not supposed to just stick to those questions and all. You're supposed to actually analyze and have a more in-depth discussion about it. Now, one of the things that I want you to remember is it calls it for a scholarly discussion. So keep that in mind. And also remember, for the AAPTEL, you only do one Zoom conference. It's only the AAPTEL Task 1. So that's the only one that you do. They cut several of them out from previous times because they realized what a crunch this was. So you just do a Zoom conference for the AAPTEL Task 1. That's all. So once you get that, that one's behind you. Now, the other thing that I mentioned in the agenda is your articles that you're reading this week. And one of the things that I said is, what do you think is the connection between teacher efficacy and teacher effectiveness? Now, I'm not going to ask you to tell me that now, but after you read those two articles, I want you to think about that question and answer it to yourself. Because according to those articles, there is a connection once you read those articles and once you read what those teachers are saying is teacher efficacy and what teacher effectiveness is. So just remember to come back and think about that. And also, I wanted you to make sure that you checked the information that talks about effectiveness. And if I can find my article for me to look at, I'll tell you which ones I'm talking about. But it is there's a list in one of the articles, and it's at the top of a page. It's the top of the second page. Well, it's actually on the third page, and it talks about, this is working with new teachers, and it's trying to identify those who will be effective. And it's talking about that test scores really don't tell the whole picture. We all know that. But it's trying to help people decide what makes an effective teacher, and that's not always new teachers. But this is what their list included. Persistence in working with children who present learning and behavioral problems, organization and planning, values the student learning, and a theory to practice. At-risk students predicts the likelihood that the respondent will be able to connect with and teach students of all backgrounds. Approach to the students predicts how the respondent will attempt to relate to students. Survival in a bureaucracy. You know, that is really an important thing to remember too. And also, when I think about the bureaucracy, I would say survival being by yourself a lot. Because many times you're in the classroom and you may be in a situation where you're the only teacher per grade level. And if you're in that situation, you don't have anybody to go to. So it's really important that you be able to survive on your own. And then just look at that list. But the next thing that I put was a case study for us to discuss. And I'm going to tell you that the reason I chose this is that I don't think you'll ever be prepared to handle this. And yet I'm going to bet that at least 3 or 4 of you will have to deal with it in your lifetime because it seems to be becoming so prevalent. So let's look at the case study, and then I put a lot of questions that where the case study was written, they didn't have them, but I wanted you to think about it and I wanted us to discuss it. You're a junior high principal. A parent has come in to discuss an issue concerning her 13-year-old daughter. And the daughter's name is Ashley Jane. She's complaining about the girls' basketball coach. He is giving special after-practice instruction to her daughter and to 2 other 9th grade children. But it's not on the same days. He doesn't keep the 3 of them. Each one of them they have different days. He meets with these students after the rest of the team has been dismissed. The parent indicates that several times her daughter has arrived late for dinner. The parent relates the coach always drives them home. but the time will frequently be as much as half an hour after we've started our evening meal. Last evening, she arrived late, but this time she had been crying. And she would not tell her parent what the difficulty was, saying only, I wasn't good enough. So the parent assumed she was talking about her playing ability and let the matter go while offering a comforting word. Later, the parent noticed that her daughter's t-shirt was torn. So her suspicions were heightened. And so she is asking, what's he doing with these girls? The parent of her daughter's two friends were of no help. Their daughters had been home by dinner time, even after the late practices. So that's the situation this parent is bringing to your attention. She's not accusing, she's asking. And that's the reason I put these questions here, the ones that I did. I have actually been through this when I was a school administrator, and I can tell you it is not fun, regardless. And I can tell you you'll be surprised, because sometimes the ones who are guilty are the ones that everybody in the whole building considers to be one of the best teachers that's in that building, because they get along with very well with everybody. So that's why I wanted us to discuss this. I think it's something that you need to be prepared for, and I don't know that you'll get it in some of the other classes, so I wanted to make sure that you got just a taste of it. So the first question is, as the principal, what would be your first actions when this parent comes to you? So what's the first thing you're going to do? Kelly.
Well, first, I would go to the coach, and I would want to know why, as the principal, I was not informed that he was keeping any students after school. Because as the administrator, I need to know everything that's going on.
And that's a very good thing to do. That's a real good approach. Anything else that you're going to do?
Not only that, but why is he driving her home in a personal car? Isn't that a reliability issue with, insurances and all of that? So driving a student home in your personal vehicle poses issues.
It also sends up really big red flags.
Yes.
And so you picked up on two of the really most important things that you should have. Any other things that you...
Documentation.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you, Lisa.
Lots of documentation.
Okay, so yes, you're going to start doing some documentation, and make sure that you document anytime you get any information from anyone about this particular type of issue. What is it you're going to tell the parents?
To let you look into it, to let you take time to investigate.
I'm going to investigate and get back to you.
Okay.
Both sides.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you anything right now. I've got to know more information before I can talk to you about it.
Right. And the parent is not asking that you do anything other than to just, let me know what's going on. So she's not accusing at this particular point in time. You know that anytime this kind of situation happens, the accusations can come later. But at least at this point in time, the parent's just asking for information. So when you meet with this coach, how are you going to approach this meeting? Because two things are going on. First of all, you know that he's keeping them not as a group of three or not as the whole team. He's keeping individuals on different days. And then the second part is he's taking them home in his personal car.
I'm going to say, are you an idiot? Do you know what year it is?
Now, let's also address it from an ethics and code of conduct kind of issue. Like, are you aware of these things as far as it relates to your job and things that you should or should not do, ethics and ethical?
And I know at one point in time, teachers had to sign an ethics statement was it at the first of the year or before testing or sometime, or maybe there's two different sets, an ethics for testing and then another one that's ethics. So I know that it should be in their mind, but it may not be, and obviously it's not in this particular teacher's. So you're going to say, okay, you're going to approach it from the ethics part. Sally's going to approach it from a more entertaining position, And you know, the relationship you have with the coach will determine how you can actually approach.
Well, I say that because, I mean, even as a female, carrying another female, and I teach 5th grade, to a chorus hockey game where the parent couldn't come and the little girl wanted to sing, and I was already going. I even went to my principal and said, is this something I could do? And she said, Sally, don't do it. It could ruin your life just like that, because you could either have a car accident or that little girl, even though you don't think so, could make an accusation and there's nothing you can do. And it is your whole career is ruined.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a female with another little female girl going to the Greenville, to the hockey game. And I even thought about it.
Right.
So a male with female students should be, I mean, they should just even be more aware, is what I was saying.
And you're right. And you're exactly right. And your principal gave you some very good advice.
I mean, I really wanted to help the little girl out, but it's not worth it.
No, it isn't. And I used to
They're going to believe whatever that kid says.
That's true. And
even if they want attention.
Yeah. Now, I will tell you, as you get to be an administrator, there will be times that you will have to take students places. But you don't do it in your personal car. You take one that the school system owns.
I would do that, and I would always try to take someone with me.
Yes, yes.
And that was my thing about when we meet with a coach. Like, I would want to know, if there's 3 kids, why are you meeting with them individually on separate days?
Right.
If 3 kids need help, why aren't they all on the same day?
And why not, can't they help each other out?
Right.
And you know, the parents' comment about the shirt being torn. Well, did the little girl get into something during basketball practice? Is that why it was torn? You know, You don't know, but the parent's going to want to know eventually. So you're going to have to ask him that question: what happened? The reason she tore her shirt.
Well, and I think it's pretty shocking that the parent is not coming in being accusatory, because in my experience at our school, they come in, you know, ready to accuse you of everything, whether or not it's valid or not. I mean,
You're right.
it seems like nowadays the parents
yesterday.
automatically believe anything the kid says.
Mm-hmm.
And in middle school especially, that's not the best practice.
You're
because
right.
They have a tendency during that age to just make stuff up for attention or to see what they can get away with and that sort of thing. And, you know, they seem to come in blazing, usually not giving anybody the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah, and I used to get that over bus stops when I'd take the students off the buses when I was an assistant principal. It seems when you inconvenience parents, they get really angry.
Well, I had one of my parents call the principal yesterday because we dismissed in the rain and they got wet.
Excuse me.
So today, they got their child out of school early so they didn't have to go through the regular dismissal line.
I'm not
Are you kidding
surprised.
me?
I'm not surprised. I'm truly not surprised. But what's that teaching the child down the road? And how are they going to cope when they have to deal with things on their own?
God bless their husband.
If they ever have one.
I don't know about your thoughts, but I almost think if I were in a principal's position and I was talking to the coach, I almost think I'd have somebody from my admin team join me.
Of
I don't
course.
think I would talk to that coach by myself.
And I think that would be wise. I will tell you that the time that I dealt with it, the one that stands out most in my mind, I took my assistant superintendent with me. And the two of us sat down with the principal first, because the principal was the one who alerted us that this had been accused. So the 3 of us then called the teacher in and said, you know, you just need to know this is what's going on. And then we suspended him with pay until we had time to check it out. We also called the SRO and asked them to come in And because it was a definite accusation that this teacher and this student had inappropriate contact. And it was on a work day, which was really stupid on a lot of people's parts.
We just had almost this exact scenario at our school. And our principal, the first thing he did was call in the whole admin team, and they talked about it. Then he called the assistant superintendent, and he came down, and then they called the teacher in and talked to him about it. And that was their plan, was to suspend with pay. But after talking to him and doing a little bit more digging, they realized that he should be fine to stay, that nothing inappropriate had actually happened. But that was the process my principal went through.
Yeah. Was
brought in the whole admin team first, then brought in the assistant superintendent, and then brought in the teacher. And so I'm just curious, we talk about what would you say to the coach? Would you start with the coach? Or because of that being such a sticky wicket, would you go somewhere else first and then have someone of a higher authority come in and talk to the coach with you?
The first thing that you've got to be careful about is telling all of your admin team. And if all of your admin team is very professional, it works. But I've also known people in the administration who were less professional than they should have been, and they gossiped. You've got to know your people. If you've got a gossipy person on your admin team, that person doesn't need to be involved, because it becomes more of a nightmare. But if you've got one, and this principal called me because of the fact that they knew if it's something that's going to hit the newspaper, I better be notified. And then because they had such high regard for the teacher, none of us could believe it, me included. Then I just said, okay, I could tell he was uncomfortable. I said, okay, my assistant superintendent and I will be down there. And we'll be down there at such and such a time. We knew the coach would be there because they had a ball game that afternoon. And so we went and we met briefly with the principal and principal only. And I'm sure he told one or maybe both of his assistant principals, but he chose not to involve them. And that was probably a good thing. One of the reasons that you might not involve all of them is the teacher, if they're innocent, they need somebody to go to that is not on the end that's having to accuse or question, if that makes sense. So not everybody necessarily needs to know what's going on. Now, if you've got a really good admin team and they work together and they're all professional, it's fine to do it that way. But to not overwhelm the teacher, I would probably just have no more than 3.
Would you go ahead and contact like the assistant superintendent and have that person sit in when you talk to the coach, or would you talk to the coach with one of your admin team first?
No, I would not. I would call in the central office first.
Okay. So you wouldn't just go directly to the coach and start talking to him about it. You'd bring in someone else from the get-go, and you all have the conversation at one time.
All right. Now let me tell you why. People at a school tend to defend the same people at the school. So if you go and talk to the teacher and the teacher gives you a good explanation and that you think that's very feasible, then you're apt to let it go. But if somebody from a different position looks at it and realizes, uh-oh, this is a newspaper article ready to happen, and it's going to smear everybody's name, and we really better take this seriously, then that's where that outside observation and that other way of looking at things, that's why you involve your central office person. You would start in a small school system, which is where I worked. I was the one usually wound up dealing with the paper. So that's the reason they knew to call me. If it's in a larger school system, you're probably going to deal with the assistant superintendent who deals with personnel. I made some behind the scene calls to our lawyer, and I talked with our lawyer and made sure I knew exactly what we needed to do. And law does change from time to time, so you need your school lawyer needs to be one that's up to date. And then when you call, every time you make a call to that lawyer, you're paying them, by the way, because you usually have them on a retainer, but then they charge for their services. But you need that. You can't anymore just do things because, and people trust you. They just don't do that anymore. You have to do things the way the law says to handle things. So, you know, that teacher or coach could have turned on that principal. And if it was all at the school, it would get really messy. But if it has got some outside, it brings some transparency to it a little bit. And it also, there's a step between that it's not all right in that place. So the way they handled it is fine if it worked and there's not any issues. I know of 2 or 3 children that have accused, like janitors. And I've never known why you would go after a janitor, because most of the time they're only there at the end of the day. But they've accused janitors and basically ruined their life. And then and then one recently was in the paper where they had accused a young man who was just helping coach. Well, it went to court and the courts found him not guilty. But look at the damage that's occurred to that young man's life. I think he was 25 years old, 24 maybe. And this person, they found no evidence at all that anything incorrect had happened. But this person accused him. And, you know, I can't help but wonder if the person that accused him of whatever they accused him of had a crush on him and he wouldn't pay any attention to him. You have to look at it both ways. You know, sometimes they're telling the truth, but sometimes they're lying just because they want more attention. And unfortunately, we don't have a crystal ball that tells us which is which. We have to try to figure it out the best we can. Anything else so far? So you're going to, when you start asking the coach questions, what are some of the questions that you're going to ask? One of them was, you know, why are you meeting with these on different days? What else are you going to ask?
Why are you taking them home in your personal car?
Yes. Are you going to, you're probably going to ask who else is here while this practice is going on. You know, you're wanting to know if there is someone who can tell you what actually they saw. So, you know, is there, and it could be a janitor. Is there a janitor that's cleaning while you're doing this? Do you have a manager, a school manager that's there running the clock for the girls? You know, who is there? You need to know what's being seen. Now, nobody can tell what's going on in the car when the coach takes them home, but you could ask what time they left, and then you could get from the parents what time they got there, and you could pretty much know the distance and that kind of thing. But a lot of times the answers you get will tell you other questions to ask. Mm-hmm. The next question I had is something that you really have to think about. What if the coach has done nothing inappropriate? How will you support the coach with these students and their parents?
Well, even if he hasn't done anything inappropriate, he's not following guidelines for appropriate behavior. So I would imagine there would have to be something put in place about his actions that led to this in the first place. I don't know, can you put someone on an action plan for behavior?
You can put it in their personnel file. You can write up information about an event that occurred and ask it to be placed in the personnel file. There is a legal way to do that. In other words, the person has to know about it, and there's certain copies that have to go. And, you know, when I would do that, I always you always have a place where the person that you're putting the information in their personnel file has the opportunity to respond back. And then you just add all of that and ask that it be sent to the central office and put in their personnel file. So that's one thing that you can do. If it's more than just a total lapse of common sense, yes, you could put them on an action plan, and you know, you would have to be careful how you worded it, because the action plans are usually connected back to school improvement.
Yeah, but before I would want to even think about an action plan, like I would want to see like if this coach is like, is he a new coach? Is he an experienced coach? Like, did he really not think, and did he really not know like the rules and the procedures? And, you know, maybe then I could be a mentor to him and help him to know like the right strategies and the right things to do. Because I mean, we know, and that's common sense. Everybody doesn't have common sense.
And most people don't.
You just support them.
And that's a really good point. And the other thing that you need to think about is how many of the coaches in your schools also coach travel ball or whatever these leagues are called, where they travel all over the state, and have teams. I can't remember what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about. If you know, they have a totally different way of looking at things. And, you know, if he had been working with the travel ball and they just tried to get him from one place to the another, then his brain may not have been in the mode of looking after myself. It may have been in the mode of looking after the children, making sure that they improved and got better. So, you know, you've got to, like Kelly said, you've got to figure out why he's doing what he's doing. And if it's just lack of common sense, then you mentor him so that hopefully you can get through it and you don't have to deal with anything like that, and you don't ruin a good teacher's reputation.
I think when you're talking to the parent, you just tell them, I've researched it, here's what I found out. You know, and I've talked with the coach and explained that that's not going to happen anymore, that, you know, we're just not going to take students in our personal cars, and we're not going to keep individual students after. You know, if he wants to keep a group after, then he'll contact you and tell you who all is going to be there, and you'll have to come pick them up later. And, you know, I would just kind of say, you know, thanks for bringing it to our attention, and, you know, this is how we're going to handle it from here on out. And then hopefully, you know, that would satisfy them.
Right. And that's important. The next question is, how will you help the coach change his practices to avoid any similar situations? And I think we've already really gone over that, because you could act as a mentor and you could point out, you know, these are things we just can't do in the public schools or in the private school where you're currently working. You know, we've got to make sure that you understand that parents look at things very differently, and you're putting your job on the line when you do this. So, you know, if you want to keep students after school and in small groups, we need to know that. Parents need to come pick them up. You don't need to be taking them home. And, you know, set up some guidelines and some information with them. The other thing is, you as a principal do have a responsibility. So you would need to reflect on the staff development that you provided for your school, and have you asked them to not meet after school in one-on-one situations. If you have, how will that affect how you handle the situation? But if you haven't, then what are you going to do to make sure that you don't allow this to happen in the future and get caught in this situation again? So, you know, when you're the principal, unfortunately, just like when you're the superintendent, it all comes back to you, and you have to deal with it whether you know anything about it at all. So you have to do a very good job of talking about, I will investigate. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about it at this point in time, but I will get back with you. Make sure you ask them for their phone number And that's something that you want to talk with them about. You don't want to send them an email with this kind of information. You want to actually talk with them. And you can do it either face-to-face if they're around the school a lot, or on the phone. That's fine, as long as you do what you say you're going to do and you get back to them. But, you know, one of the first things, especially if you've got teachers that haven't all worked together before, at the beginning of the year, you need to remind them of these things, regardless of the age of the children. Is you remind them that, okay, it's really dangerous to take kids home in your car, just like Sally, your principal, told you it's not worth it. I used to tell my teachers when they would come to me and talk about corporal punishment, I'd say, it's not worth it. I don't care if the parents tell you it's okay. It's not worth it for your life and your name to be dragged through the paper, because I know the person who tells you they're going to, that it's perfectly okay, they're also the ones going to turn on you in a heartbeat and run and say you did something and that you damaged their children forever and that kind of thing. So this is the same kind of situation. It is just not worth it to do that. And I was brought up and trained when I was at UNCG as a doctoral candidate that you absolutely did not do that. And the school system that I worked in Wilkes County as an assistant principal, and teacher, we knew we didn't do that. But when I went to Yadkin County, they were very much in the practice of using their personal cars. They even had a policy that allowed them to use their personal cars and they would be reimbursed. So you have to really be careful when you inherit situations like that. Now, it took me years to get that turned around, because that's not something that people think about. Now, today, I think it'd be easier to change it. But at that point in time, it took several years, because it was just, well, we don't have a school car. I said, well, you will have. And so we took some of our old cars that were not some that we would let our people go for distances on trips, and then we sent them to each one of the schools. And so they had a school car then. It wouldn't go very far, but it would go in the county, and then you had that as a backup. But when you ask them to not use their personal cars, you have to provide alternatives, especially if parents can't come to pick the children up and they're sick. But take somebody with you. I mean, I can remember at being an assistant principal, we had to take this one poor kid home that was so sick. We actually had to drive over a little branch to get there. And the car that belonged to our school, the principal had it. So I called the principal who I had taught for before I became an assistant principal. I said, may we please borrow your car? And this is why. And he said, yes, Barbara, come on, get it. And so I went and got it. And then I went back and I got the teacher of the student to go with me. And we went and took that kid home. And the parent was very appreciative of it. But it was one of those situations. It was a young boy, middle school age. And I wasn't going to get accused of something. And I wasn't going to have my teacher assistant accused of anything either. And we're talking about in the early 90s. So, you know, we were trained many years ago that this is what you don't do. But somewhere along the line, some school systems didn't get that message. So hopefully everybody is a little bit better prepared now than they have been. So you have to think about how you, at the beginning of the year and looking at rules, how are you going to go over things and how are you going to remind them?
And that's one thing, you know, we have a new principal now, and, you know, she has her own rules and expectations, but at the beginning of the year, it's, all right, you know, read the staff handbook, and, you know, if you have any questions, come and talk to me. Like, I know I would do that differently, because once that staff handbook goes on the bookshelf, it doesn't come back out.
That's right.
Especially, like, even if it's one new person each year, like, you still remind the staff about all your expectations.
And they can get mad and they can turn their eyes in every direction that counts, but you covered your butt.
Right.
And what you're doing is you're covering yourself to make sure that you have reminded people to use common sense, and there's certain things you don't let yourself get caught doing. All right.
So how do you decide what the most important things are that you talk about every year? I mean, because, you know, there's so much and that everybody needs to know. And on one hand, you don't want to keep repeating the same thing to the people who've been there 20 years, but at the same time, you can't not tell everybody because, you know, it could come back and on you because they can say, well, I didn't know that. How do you decide what's the most important things that you're gonna, because you only have a limited amount of time. I mean, you can't spend hours and hours and hours talking to these teachers about everything, not to mention it wouldn't do any good because they'd start tuning you out anyway, you know, or start grading papers or something. So, so how do you make that decision as to what's the most important thing that you have to make sure your teachers know all the time?
I would always look at it as what is most important that can cause the teacher the most trouble. And the second one is what is most important for the children. You know, what is it? So I would look at anything that could jeopardize their job for the teachers. And the things to deal with the children would be anything where the children could be harmed. So, you know, you go over the things about what's the protocol we use if you think the children are being abused at home. What's the protocol we use when we have students who are misbehaving, and, you know, things that could cause a teacher to lose their job or things that could cause a child to be harmed. And then you just point out, okay, you might give them a list of these are important policies that you need to know. And actually, what I used to do, like I said, I was in a small school system, and we brought all of our new teachers in about 2 days before school started, and they went through all the kinds of information that they needed, and then they usually call me in to do policies. And I went through our policy book and picked the ones that would be like, if they wanted to do a field trip, what's the procedure? You have to provide it for everybody, so you're going to have to figure out a way to get money for the ones who can't pay. The parents, you can't make them go if parents don't want them to go. And then I would go over how you take up money, and you don't ever keep any money. You always turn it into the to the office and let the office make the deposit. You keep a receipt, you know, and those kinds of things. So anything that could cause the teachers that probably wouldn't be common knowledge and could cause them to lose their jobs, that's what I tried to go over. And then you would just pick, not all of those, but you would pick the ones that you saw in your school that had the most potential for issues. Does that make sense? Okay. All right. It's about, we're about over, but real quickly, will you contact your superintendent and make him or her aware of the situation? If so, when? I think you need to let them know. Again, you need to know their professionalism. Not all, it's not just at the local level that there's lack of professionalism sometimes, but you know, you don't want to be talking about a teacher that there's nothing going on. But if there's any possibility that there could be an inkling of truth, then you need to let them know. And it would probably be the superintendent, or in larger systems, the one who's over personnel. And then they could give you, this is what you do and this is what you don't do. All right. When are you going to turn it over to police for an investigation?
I guess as soon as you saw that there may be something inappropriate going on. Like once you've done your investigation and you've talked to people and kind of done that, then I think it's easier now because most of us have school resource officers. And so, you know, at our school, he's immediately involved in everything.
Yes.
You know.
And that's the beauty of it. Most of the time they're there and you're going to involve them immediately. I will tell you that we did that. And the assistant district attorney listened to the SBI agent who happened to be the person that they called in to do the investigation. And she said to him that we didn't handle it right. And he called me and said something about that we didn't handle it right. I said, excuse me? Now, you have to know me well enough. I think you all have figured it out by now. If you accuse me of something, I'm going to say, I want to know what you're talking about. And if I know that that's a lie, I'm going to defend ourselves, you know, because we handled it textbook. And I told him, I said, I don't know what you've been told, but I said, as soon as we learned of it, my assistant superintendent and I went to the school. We met with the principal. The principal called the teacher in. We met with the teacher. We suspended the teacher until we could call the SRO in. And I said, so then we turned it over for investigation, and we got out of it. I said, so you tell me what the process is. Well, that's right, but that's not what the SBI agent told us. I said, well, the SBI agent wasn't here until afterward. We did all that up front. He said, well, we'll just have to meet. Well, after it was handled, there was never a meeting because we handled it right. And, you know, he's a political animal, so somebody was fussing at him about something, and heaven knows what that was, but he was trying to deflect it. And it gave me an opinion about some of the SBI agents. There's also professionalism in SBIs and in sheriff's office and in police departments, and there's lack of it. And so you never know what you're going to get. And the reason that our sheriff's department did not do the investigation themselves, and this was really smart. So I don't know why the assistant DA got all bent out of shape. She was related to the man's wife. And she said, I can't do that. And because I'm related, I'm going to call the SBI in and ask them, the ones for our region, to come in and do this investigation. And it was one of them that went to the DA and said assistant DA and said we didn't handle it right. Well, I don't know how we could have handled it any differently, because it was, soon as we heard about it, we handled it. We called in the agency that should be investigating it, and you know, as far as we knew, it was ongoing, and it was done right. But you will always hear, well, they didn't handle it right, or they didn't do this right. It's one agency trying to make themselves look better than the other agency, and who's best scapegoat, whoever the other person is. So you just have to realize that it doesn't matter how professional you are and how much you do things exactly the right way. There are some that are not as professional in other organizations who have jobs at a high level that they should be more professional than that. So you just never know what you're going to get, and you just have to be prepared for everything and be flexible. And in a nice way, defend yourself, not in the paper. You know, I never defended myself in the paper. I defended myself to the person when he called. And so obviously he never did follow up with that. So then the other question to just think about, what are some possible outcomes of this situation? There's two or three. One is that you find that there's absolutely nothing going on and you just do a reminder and you mentor. One is you do find a little bit of discrepancy that caused you a little bit of heartburn. So you write a letter to the personnel file and you have that filed, and then he has an opportunity to respond to it. And then the third one is there was a whole lot of things not appropriate. And then that's when you turn it over for investigation, that kind of thing. But I really think that sometimes having the police, and this is in our news in the Forsyth County area, a student had accused an SRO of throwing her to the ground and treating her inappropriately as he arrested her. And it was a middle school student. And her mother got on the TV, and the Ministerial Association in Forsyth County or Winston-Salem area, they decided that they were going after the officer. And it was the officer's fault. He should never have done that. He shouldn't be working with children, blah, blah, blah. Well, the officer had his headgear, the camera, and the little picture that a friend had taken of the arrest and the truth of what happened were about a good distance apart. The hour-long video showed him asking the student to stop 17 times and actually counted 17 times that he asked her to stop. And she wasn't where she was supposed to be. It didn't match. But anyway, that made the news because the mother went to the news. So I just say to you, when you're dealing with any kind of controversial thing, be prepared for the news. And this one, the school never did have to make a comment, which I found really interesting. The ones that they went after the SRO. So that was the one who had to make the comment. But there was a school person standing out there watching that whole thing. And I told Harold when I saw the little clip that the mother had shared, I said, that school person's not going to let that SRO do what they're accusing him of. There is no way on earth that that's the story. And so then because it is a middle school student, the judge in the county had to rule as to whether to release that video camera that the officer was wearing. And he chose to release it this week. So you never know. And you just have to be prepared for anything. And you have to learn real quickly on how to say, you know, I really don't know. We'll investigate it. Let me get all the information you got. Let me check into it. And you just come across as positive as you can, and you're still going to make people mad. If you go into administration, you don't need to be planning to be liked for the rest of your life. It's probably not going to happen. Like I said, I used to get cussed out more for bus routes and taking kids off buses because they couldn't sit in their chair or the seat or something than anything else. And I thought, okay, if this is the worst thing we've got to deal with, then we don't have much to deal with. But anyway, just be prepared. And that's the reason I'm doing these little case studies, because I think it's important for you to think about it so that it won't catch you off guard. All right, anything else for tonight? Thank you so much for joining us. You have a great week. Yes, ma'am. Bye.